Hello, welcome to Woodcraft Spokane. My friend Joel and I are going to walk through dust collection, vacuum, air filtration, and try not to make it a science project, but try to make it an application as to how does this apply in our shops. And what we're doing is we're making sawdust. First of all, let's talk about the early dust collection. The early dust collection would be right here and right here. The old broom and dustpan. We probably all got them hanging around. They're still effective, but it wasn't until we started modernizing these tools that the manufacturers started coming up with what we know as dust collection. So, any questions so far, Joel?
I see no questions as of yet.
Good. So a dust collection versus a vacuum. When do you need it? What's the difference? Right now, you can see we have the jet vac or dust collector next to us. And I think if Joel's camera is reaching it, we're showing a Festool HEPA vacuum. So what is the difference between a vacuum and a dust collector? Well, a dust collector will never be a vacuum, and a vacuum will never be a dust collector. There's certain tools out there that generate a lot more dust, wood chips and that, and should always have a dust collector attached to them. Those would be tools like your joiner, your planer, your high volume sanders. You can get away, and I understand sometimes it's a matter of space, sometimes it's a matter of budget. But for those tools to be effective, we should be using dust collection instead of vacuum. The thing about, here's the example on dust collection versus vacuum. If I have my dust collector hooked up to my planer and I don't turn it on, as that wood is feeding through the blades and it's chipping that wood to get it to a thickness, that wood will lay on top of my piece coming through. Then all of a sudden my blades are riding on the chips because they're not being evacuated by a dust collector. So it makes your tools more efficient. It's easier on your knives. So when is a dust collector important? A dust collector is important for the safety and operation of your tools. I just put a new 25-inch sander in my shop. I own a cabinet shop here in town. They even gave you the minimum CFMs for a dust collector hooked to it. So if the manufacturer thinks it's important enough to put that in the owner's manual, it's probably important enough. So let's talk about some of the differences. Joel, I think one of our questions today is, what is HEPA? Where does that come in on our vacuums? Well, when I researched HEPA, all it is a national standard for filtration of microns. Well, what's a micron, you ask, Joel?
I do. What's a micron?
Well, that is the actual sizing of the dust particle. So HEPA vacuums are designed to filter down to a certain size on the dust particle. There's nothing more to it than that. A HEPA filter or a HEPA vacuum is designed to remove a certain micron size. So let's talk about just the definition of a dust collector versus a vacuum. Here's what I found on dust collectors, Joel. They create a vortex. And Joel, you're asking, what's a vortex?
Again, what's a vortex?
Air is pulled through the chamber of the dust collector towards the vacuum conveying pump at a high speed. And it spins in a cyclonic motion, so a circular motion. With that, centrifugal force is created by this fast circular airflow and drives the heavy particles, fines, and dust outward towards the wall of the silicone or the cyclone chamber. So that's basically the definition of a vortex. Where a vacuum, Joel, it's a space with nothing in it. not even air, by which mechanics creates negative pressure. No, there's no such thing though, Joel, as a total vacuum, because it's impossible to remove all the airs and particles from space. They use vacuum systems, Joel, in when you're gluing something up as a clamping system. It's basically a big baggie that attaches to a vacuum, and that sucks that baggie down to hold pressure. So when you're doing glue ups on veneering and stuff, that's where a vacuum system comes into place. The bottom line to you and I, we turn on a switch, this thing sucks dust and debris. But those are the two definitions of a vortex or a cyclonic dust collector versus a vacuum. So, what's the missing ingredient, you're asking, Joel?
I have been wanting to ask that for a while now. What's the missing ingredient?
How about air filtration?
Oh.
So, being one of the instructors in this shop safety class here, being a paramedic EMT for years between the Navy and private ambulance, we're only issued one set of lungs. And our lungs are overworking already in our environment. The only filtration we basically have for our lungs, Joel, is our nose hairs. They act as the filtration for our lungs. So, is it important that we have air filtration? Absolutely. Dust collection without air filtration is a problem because we're letting our lungs do the air filtrating for us. And again, we're only issued one set of those. I'm as sick of masks as everybody else is right now in the current world. Whether I agree with it or not, I still am bound by the same rules as far as wearing a mask when I'm out in public. In my shop, Joel, I'm good about wearing a mask. So it's not really a big transition for me to walk out of the shop and walk into my local Woodcraft and put a mask on because I'm used to it. Same thing with ear and eye protection. I believe that we're exposed to so much in our environment these days that we need to always have ear and eye protection. It's not by coincidence, Joel, that our safety cabinet is sitting right here. So that all ties into dust collection, ear filtration, masks. So let's talk a little bit about another thing. I think, Joel, you and I get asked this all the time when we're out on the floor. What about static electricity? So static electricity in a dust collector. Do we need to ground the home system? There's been multiple university reports on this. Here's what they came up with. Typically, a dust collector of this size is not going to create enough static electricity that we have to worry about a dust fire. What happens in that, though, we're out in our shop, I drop a really small screw on the floor. We're sweeping up, we're cleaning up, I take my vacuum system, my dust collector, and I suck that screw into the dust collector. In there is an impeller that's spinning off an electric motor. That screw hits the impeller, we have a spark, hence we have a dust fire. So everything that I saw said that in a small shop situation, unless we're using industrial dust cleaners, we do not need to ground those systems. I will tell you though, that in hard piping my shop with this material right here, the static electricity will draw dust to the outside of this plastic pipe. So whether or not a grounding system would help with dust on the outside of my pipes, that I'm not sure of. I do know that I feel after the research I've done, confident that I have not grounded the system in my shop. Let's talk about a canister versus a bag. So a canister system, when these first came out, Joel, everything had a bag in it. You had a plastic bag in the bottom, you had a bag in the top. As the dust comes into these, it's designed for the heavies to drop into the bag, and the dust particles themselves, again measured in microns, would stay in those upper bags or this canister. I find that I've changed over all my old bag systems to this canister system, Joel. The thing about it is just reminding myself and my employees to make sure that we are cleaning it every time we turn it on. How do you clean it? They provide you this really easy handle to do that. And then about every third dumping of the bag, we will physically remove that filter, take it out, and actually get in there and blow it out. So, Joel, any questions so far?
Not until we get to fittings.
Okay. Joel, you've probably heard that the fastest way to get from point A to point B is what?
Straight line?
A straight line. You are on the ball today, I got to tell you. So, straight line. Then it makes sense to me, am I not going to get the most efficiency out of my vacuum or my dust collector by creating a straight line? So what interrupts those lines, you say, right, Joel?
I do. I think I know.
Well, we start doing stuff like a Y. So this is designed to come into here and fit on there. Now, my pipe comes across my ceiling, and I've created the Y so that I can take my drop with a coupler and hook drops to my different machines. That way I can take stuff and turn it on or off, right, with my dust gate. So why I bring up the straight line is there's studies out there that every time we put one of these in, or every time we put one of these in, we're losing 5 to 7% efficiency of our dust collector just by creating the elbow or the Y. So we want to keep our dust collectors in as straight a line as we can. There's times where my whole shop, Joel, is hard piped like this with drops. Then out of my drops comes my flexible 4-inch hose. So they make this in different kind of configuration too, Joel. This happens to be kind of the thin one. It's real pliable. They make the heavier ones, which will help you when they're laying on the floor, not creating kinks and bends. They're heavier. One of the things too, Joel, that I wanted to point out was this hose, whether it's the 2.5-inch that we have here or the 4-inch, has all kinds of different fittings that we can screw into and then go on top of our machines. So again, when you're laying out your dust collection, and I don't know, it seems like, Joel, we spend about 10% of our day helping customers design and retrofit dust collection. So it's an important part of what we do here at Woodcraft. We always tell them, try to keep things as straight as you can keep them. Try to use the biggest diameters that you can on your hoses and your pipes. To try to come out to take a 4-inch fitting and come out to 2.5, you've reduced the volume by almost 50%. So try to keep that stuff in a 4-inch. Wastegates, Joel. We have a couple different styles of wastegate. They both function the same way, plastic versus metal. What I found out in my own shop is these plastic ones like to gum up with sawdust. So I would take a paper clip and I would clean out the inside of the track on it all the time. Well, with the metal ones, I'm not having to do that as much. So there's times on this piping though, because the weight difference is about double, when I put one of these metal blast gates in, a lot of times, Joel, when I hook it to the pipe, I will actually take and run a couple screws through the pipe and into the wastegate. The other thing that I can do if I'm having a problem with sealing is I can take some double-sided tape and go around that lip there, Joel. I can take some duct tape. I can do whatever I want. And if I really need to get serious, Joel, we have what's called extreme tape. We sell this, Joel, right here at Woodcraft in Spokane.
What's the number on that so folks can look it up?
That number would be 149888.
And why is this a great product?
It's a good product because it's specifically made for ducts, joints, and hoses. If you bring an HVAC guy into your home, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, he is going to take, when he's doing your duct work, he's going to seal all his joints with HVAC tape. So it's no different than what we're trying to do here, Joel. And then we have a couple other neat little accessories that I like here at Woodcraft, Joel. And these are available out on our shelves too. So when I take and put one of these fittings on my hose, Joel, I always like to back it with one of these. Because over time, someone's going to kick this. It's going to start working loose. But if I have that sitting there, I've just added a hose clamp. We don't take and put hoses in our cars on our radiators without a clamp. And that's the idea behind that, Joel. We have other accessories. We have the wall hangers. What these are designed for is to take and help you hang that pipe. An item that I thought was really cool that I just found today is this wastegate that actually has the built-in wall mount to it. So you can screw that, Joel, right into the wall of your shop and run your hosing or your tubing through that. So it comes down to, and as we're starting to wrap this up, I'm sure someone's got questions about size, Joel.
Actually, yeah. One of the questions that I've seen, and I know that on the floor, a lot of customers have that question is, let's say most people in their shop, they have a DeWalt, a Bosch, and a table saw of a different manufacturer that's from the other tools that they have. And the one thing that they always think is, are the fittings universal with all tools?
That's a great question, Joel. And what I'm understanding from that is they're wondering, is there a universal 4-inch or is there a universal 2.5? You and I do this every day, and I would tell you, I think based on our experience, no. I wish they would get together and make 4-inch, 4-inch. They would make 2.5, 2.5. It would save everybody a lot of time and energy trying to put these systems together. I'm not going to pick on any manufacturer, but there are some of them out there, Joel, Craftsman, that are real brand proprietary, and they kind of do their own thing. So a 2.5 with Craftsman may not be what a 2.5 is with one of the other brands. So we're constantly trying to be creative. That's where some silicone tape, some duct tape, some silicone caulking, there's times that we have to go to those extremes. The one thing that I do know is our whole back wall here at Woodcraft Spokane is filled with nothing but dust collection. Fittings, hoses, sleeves. There's universal sleeves. There's way of cutting things down. And we as sales professionals have gotten way better between outfitting our own shops and doing this every day about helping people get through this maze of dust collection. So Joel, do we have any other questions out there?
Can you talk a little bit about the air filtration systems?
Well, that's a good question too, Joel, because I touched on how important air filtration is earlier, but how do you decide? What do you do? Well, if we open up the box of an air filtration, I have a JDS system at home. We have Jet here in our classroom. Within the manufacturer's specs will have a CFM, which is a way of measuring what that air filter is capable of. So they will give you a math formula, Joel, to take a room that's X amount width, X amount of length, X amount of height, and figure out how many CFM you need for that air filtration system to be effective. My JDS in my shop, if I base it off manufacturer specs, will take and in a 10 point something minute time period, Joel, will absolutely filter through every bit of air that's in my shop and back out. It's a 3-stage filter system. The jets are the same way. So that's kind of how an air filtration works. Again, I believe dust collection without air filtration, we're creating a huge problem. An air filter will not vacuum, but it will protect your lungs. What else do you have for us, Joel?
Well, you know, this is kind of one that I've come up with. And when I'm on the floor and I'm helping a customer, I get this question at least twice or 3 times a day. And that is, I'm building my shop and I've got my tools in there. I don't know where to start. And they look at the sea of black piping and fittings, and they don't know where to start. Can you give our viewers kind of a checklist of what they need to do to make it easy for them before they walk in?
Yeah. So when I laid out my shop, Joel, one of the things I did, and we have these books right here at Woodcraft Spokane, they have how to lay out a small shop. And in there it talks about flow in your shop. And this is a little off the dust collection, but it ties in. The flow is, if I'm bringing lumber out of the back of my truck into my shop, the first thing in my shop that it hits is my miter station. From my miter station, it's going to start the milling process. And the reason it hits my miter station first, if I'm bringing in 12-foot boards and I don't need 12 feet, I cut them down to 6, which is a way more manageable piece of lumber. From there, it's going to go into my planer, my joiner, my table saw, my finish sander, maybe hit a router or my router table shaper somewhere along the way. So when I set up my dust collection, I actually took a piece of paper and made little cutouts for what each one of those machines represented, put it on that piece of paper until I was comfortable with the layout of my shop, and then I started designing my dust collection around that. I realized in my shop I could get away with 2 runs of hard pipe, one down my one wall and one right over to my table saw. Then from that point, I could start figuring out what componentry I needed. In my shop, I have 2 of these jets, one in one corner, one in the other. That jet in this corner is dedicated to my table saw only, Joel. And in the other corner, it runs my pipe, which feeds all my smaller machines with wastegates. So part of designing your shop is figuring out, where do I put my dust collection? That small shop books that we have up front will also talk to you about, because these are noisy, taking your dust collection in your air compressor and putting them outside of your shop and piping into your shop. So what you're doing there is you're freeing up some room and you're reducing the amount of noise that you have, Joel.
Fantastic. What's your favorite piece of equipment?
Right now, Joel, because I just got it, and having a production shop, there is a bottom line. We're not a nonprofit. I have employees. And we brought in the new 2550 Laguna sander, and I've had it about 2 weeks. Joel, the amount of time we are saving right now with the cabinets and furniture that we're building, I'm telling you, it is going to be a good addition to my shop as far as affecting my bottom line. I ran a bunch of cabinet doors through it this week, and that would be normally us sitting at a bench, hand sanding. Another tool, Joel, that we brought in at the same time, and we do a lot of pocket screwing within the cabinet and furniture world, and I bought a Craig Foreman, which we have here. We'll have one in the classroom to demo. That tool there, same way, Joel. I cut about 18 pocket holes the other day in 2 minutes, where before that would have maybe been a half an hour project by the time you got things set up. And the thing with dust collection too, there's some tools out there, Joel, it is really hard to get efficient dust collecting out Your miter saw comes to mind. When you set up your miter saw, you'll see people set up tents. You'll see them set up all kinds of things to contain dust. It's one of those tools that's pretty tough to contain. You're a lathe guy. There's a lot of times that it's pretty hard when you've got chips flying all over your shop. Maybe you're making duck calls or something. Joel likes to make duck calls. He does some beautiful work on them. That you've got chips flying everywhere, and how do you contain that with a dust collector? They make some floor stuff that you can take and aim into it and stuff. It's still not going to replace a broom and a dustpan in your shop. It is designed to work with that and with the air filtration.
That's fantastic. Well, I can't think of any more questions, and we don't have any new questions on Facebook.
Well, Joel, as we end this thing up, we have a guest in the classroom today. April's a sales associate that just joined us here. Do you have any questions, April?
I guess just specific brands do different parts that are brand specific work on different machines.
Then we're back to trying to retrofit a 4-inch coming out of a Laguna into a Powermatic saw. So yes, I will say that there is a way to do that. That's where it gets creative. That's where the three of us as sales professionals try to make sure that we stay on top of this. But gosh darn it, I learn something every day from a customer on tricking out a system. And with my system, where I just added new tools this last month, it's always in flux. I think your dust collection system is one of those things, Joel, that's probably going to be always in flux. Where you add a tool, then you're going to have to do a change up on your dust collection. But that's a great question, April.
Good job. Great question. Well, I think that we've covered just about everything.
Okay.
Anything else you think you missed?
We didn't really touch on the cyclones, or the dust deputies. So the idea behind them is to make your vacuum system or your dust collector more efficient by making this the primary filter of the heavy chips. So the idea is that this is going to fill the heavies up first, and the dust and finer particle, finer micron stuff will be heading towards your dust collector. Otherwise, that's kind of what their whole deal is, Joel. They're probably better fitted for a vacuum system than a dust collector.
Wonderful.
Well, then I just invite people down to Woodcraft Spokane. If you're setting up a shop, you're struggling with this, come down and see one of us. Every one of us are woodworkers and woodworker women in this shop. We would love to help you set that up and try to answer some of your questions. And I will tell you right now, we are fully stocked on dust collection. And Joel, I believe this month in the tab, isn't it 15 or 20?
That's 25%.
25% off all dust collection at Woodcraft. How we get it that low, I'm not sure. But it is 25% off dust collection at Woodcraft. So come see us. Thank you for your time and hanging out with us on a Saturday.
Great job, Steve. This is Joel. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. We really enjoy bringing you these videos live and then on our website to watch at a later time. Thank you for tuning in as always, and let us know in your comments what you'd like to see demos on, and we'll try to get those scheduled. Thanks, guys.